Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karam. With me today to discuss getting along in the world is Daryl Davis. Daryl's been with us many times. He is, he's a rock and roll heavy. I love watching him play music, but how most people will know him outside of the music world is the fact that he's talked many members of the Ku Klux Klan out of their robes. And one of the things, Daryl, that you've often said that I love is, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? So here to apply that to politics, our good friend Daryl Davis. How you doing, Daryl?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thank you for having me back again. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Listen, I think about you pretty much every day when I'm either at the White House or in Congress because of the very thing that you said. And I watch as politicians are divided, more divisive than ever. And then this past week, you even had someone getting sick of it that I never thought would be sick of the toxicity, and that's Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and going, look, we got to find a better way. Donald Trump, of course, replied that she was how do you put it, a crazy lunatic traitor. So he's not giving up the toxicity, but for those
you notice that every time anybody, I notice it especially with musicians, whenever a musician like, say, a Bruce Springsteen or whoever, Robert De Niro,
right.
a celebrity, says something, negative or contrary to what he says, all of a sudden that celebrity becomes a washed up has-been that never was, in his eyes.
Yeah, that's
So, he's following his pattern with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, as to whether she is sincere or not, that remains. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, that's so. But if you have, all right, imaginary scenario. We have a far left and a far right. Maybe somebody like AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene sitting down, wanting to learn how to get together and talk. How would you? I'd put you in the mediation there and say, Daryl, do your magic. What do you do?
Well, I apply 5 core principles. And I tell you what, I have been to 64, 65 countries on 6 continents. I've been to all 50 states here in this country. What does that mean? It means I've been exposed to a wide variety of people. People who may or may not look like me, may or may not speak my language, may or may not worship as I do, perhaps don't worship at all, whatever. But no matter how far I've gone from our country, Brian, the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada, right next door to Mexico, or halfway around the globe, every single person I've encountered is a human being. And as such, we all have great qualities, we all have flaws. But one thing we all have in common are these 5 core values. Every human being wants to be loved, they want to be respected, they want to be heard, they want to be treated fairly and truthfully, and they want the same things for their family as anybody else would want for their family or for somebody else's family, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene is no different. She wants those 5 core values as well. Now, what I would do, sitting down between the two of them, I would encourage them to listen to each other civilly, even if they don't hear or don't agree with the other person's point of view. Sit down and listen. Understand why they feel that way. And this is especially pertinent today, right now, because next week is what? Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And how many times have you and I heard, I'm not going to my family's house for Thanksgiving dinner because my brother voted for so-and-so and I voted for this one, and I can't talk to them. Listen, let me tell you something. You know as well as I do. Anybody who's in office is only going to be there a minimum of 4 years, a maximum of 8 years. How long have you been with your family? Decades? Are you going to throw away a decades-long relationship over somebody who's only going to be around for 4 to 8 years? That's ridiculous.
That you may not even know.
Exactly. Okay. If I can go to Ku Klux Klan rallies, you can sit down with your family at dinner, regardless of who they voted for.
Now, see, you're the only person on the planet I know that can say that sentence.
Right.
that's pretty heavy. So I want to break that one down for a minute. For people who don't know, You have actually gone to Klan rallies and spoken to members of the Klan. You're a big guy. You're not a small guy, and you definitely don't have the color that they like. And
Right.
so that's how do you do that?
And I've also been invited to speak at Klan meetings and rallies.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, what do you
But you know,
tell them?
I tell them the same thing I just told you. Everybody wants those five core values. Everyone wants to be loved. They want to be respected. They want to be heard. They want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And they want the same things for their family as you want for your family. If we can learn to apply those five core values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation, it doesn't have to be about race. It could be about any hot topic: abortion, nuclear
Right.
weapons, Gaza, Israel, Russia, Ukraine, whatever, the last presidential election. You're on one side, I'm on the other side. If we can apply those five core values, right, or any of those five values, I'll guarantee you your navigation of that situation, that culture, that society will be much more positive, much more smooth, and much more productive. And that's the way I would conduct sitting down between Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC.
And
You,
let's
you
talk.
don't you don't have to respect what the other person is saying, but you need to respect their right to say it.
Right. Well, that's the old saying for the First Amendment. I may
Right,
disagree with what you say, but will defend to death your right to say it.
right.
And that's, but we don't seem to have much of that today in
Well,
politics in the
because we
United
have,
States.
well, not only in politics, just in general culture, we have a culture well, we don't have that culture. We have a cancel culture,
Right.
and we need to cancel the cancel culture.
Ooh, I just came up with a title for this. Cancel the cancel culture. I like that. But I see that. But I see that on both sides, and
Yeah,
sometimes it's very hard. For example, just because I disagree with the president of the United States, or just because I criticize him, I'm automatically called a libtard. If I disagree or criticize the left, I'm automatically a fascist or I'm automatically a Donald Trump supporter. And when in fact I'm just sitting there trying to call balls and strikes, and you're getting pissed off at the umpire because you didn't like the pitch. But
right.
but but how do
Well,
you go ahead?
okay. So, people talk way too much about what they're against. I'm anti-racist. I'm anti this. I'm anti that. Okay, I say I am not anti-racist. Now, what is it? What when people hear me say that, like what? No, to me, if we use racist as the noun,
Right,
I am anti. I'm not anti the person, the racist person. I'm anti the message. I'm anti racism. So not the is, but the ism, right?
right,
So I would rather talk about what I'm for. Everybody's against something, but let's talk about what we're for. I am pro-human. Okay, I am pro-human. This is why I believe I can go and I can sit down and talk to neo Nazis, KKK members, and other people of that mindset, whether they belong to a group or whether it's just a run of the mill racist next door or what have you, right? And have a decent conversation. And more times than not, that person ends up denouncing and renouncing that ideology and giving it up. Not all the time, but many, many times. I've been doing this for 45 years. And that's a result of applying those five core values and not being anti the person, you know, anti the racist, be anti the racism, the message.
right.
I guess the old saying was, "Don't kill the messenger, kill the message," or whatever.
Right. Well, killing the messenger is what they talk about when they hate the press. But that's to your point, I guess it when you listen to people argue, yeah, they go anti everything, but when you ask them what they're for, they
They don't
often
know.
they can't explain it.
Well,
And
I'll give you an example. Okay, so down in Charlottesville, you remember the incident down in Charlottesville, right?
I was there, yes.
Yes. Okay, so I went and met this Klan leader in the park, where the statue is,
Yeah.
and to talk to him. And we were on, we both were going to the courthouse to watch this trial of one of the defendants in that Charlottesville thing. So anyway, I'm standing in the park, and all these Antifa people come, and they start screaming at him and screaming at me, and screaming at me because I'm talking to him. And one of them, now they're all in a row, standing in the Klansman and I, standing side by side talking, and these people, they all line up in a row and start yelling at us and pointing their fingers in our faces. And one guy says in my face, you should be on our side. So I stepped over onto his side. I said, okay, I'm here. Now what? He like backed away. It's like, okay, so fine. I came on your side. Now what do you want me to do? I'm here. He didn't know what to do. To your point, they can tell you what they're against. But when you ask, okay, now what are you for? I'm here. What do you want to do? Nothing.
What do you find that is the biggest sticking point in getting people to talk about things like that?
Fear, ignorance, and fear. Okay, we listen. All these things, whether somebody is whatever they believe in, whoever they vote for, there's a reason. If they're racist, if they're anti-gay, if they're anti-Islamophobic or homophobic or whatever they are, there are reasons. I'm not saying there are justifiable reasons. I'm saying there are reasons.
Right.
And you got to find out what the reason is. And once you find out, then maybe you understand. Oh, I see why. I see why you're afraid of dogs, especially German shepherds, because one bit you when you were 5 years old. Okay, and you never got over it. All right. It could be as simple as that. It could be some of the deep trauma. It could be something. But somewhere along that person's lifeline, they learned something that was not beneficial to them, but they feel that they must do it in order to protect themselves, in order to feel better.
And
I
everyone
can't,
they love.
and everyone we love. Okay, it
Yeah.
becomes an internal part of them. It's a learned behavior. But here's the problem: because the counter to that is you, me, and people who have kids. They tell their kids, "You were told when you were a kid, a tiger does not change his stripes, a leopard does not change his spots," and we believe that. So why would we believe that a Klansman or Klanswoman would change their robe and hood? Why would we believe that a Nazi would change his swastika armband? That's who they are, like the tiger and the lion
Yeah.
and the leopard. But
However, those.
however, the tiger and the leopard are born with those
There you
stripes and spots. Those are immutable characteristics. That's who they are.
go.
The
Right.
Klansman and Nazi are not born with the robe and hood and the swastika. That is acquired. That is learned. What can be learned can be unlearned. We have to understand that and separate the difference between the two.
And so tell me, for people who are going, all right, this is BS. You have actually, tell me about the first time you talked a Klan member out of their robes. And wait a minute, how many Klan members have you talked out of their robes?
Okay, I won't say I talked them out of their robes. They talked themselves out of their robes.
Okay.
I gave them reason to do that. Okay, over 200, Brian.
Over 200.
Yes, I've been doing this now for about 45 years.
And you have a collection of them, don't you?
I sure do. Yeah, I keep it locked up, outside of my house, away from my neighborhood.
Probably wise. But tell me the first time it happened. How did you explain to people how that went down?
Okay, it was kind of weird, kind of funny. I had this exalted cyclops, which means district leader in Klan terminology, what you and I would call a councilman, alderman, selectman,
Yep.
in my car, and we were riding around. And we got on the conversation of crime. And of course, he wanted to talk about black crime. And he was referring to Washington, D.C. And first he said, they say, which is the authority that we never see.
Right.
They say, right, that all
They
black
say we
people,
never landed on the moon. That guy.
right.
Yeah, that's
So he said, they say that all black people are born with a gene that makes them violent. So I'm driving, he's sitting over here. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And he says, well, who's doing all the carjackings and drive-bys in Southeast, referring to Southeast Washington, D.C. Southeast D.C., for your listeners and viewers, if you're not in the area, is a quadrant in Washington, D.C., which is predominantly black.
yeah.
There are some white people who live there, but it is predominantly black, and is very high crime ridden. And I said, okay, black people, right? I said, but you're not considering the demographics. That's what lives there. He says, no, 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 no. Demographics have nothing to do with it. You all have this gene. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, who's committing all the crime up in Bangor, Maine? White people, because that's what lives there, right? And he goes, no, that has nothing to do with it. I said, look at me. I said, I'm as black as anybody you've ever seen. I have never done a carjacking or a drive-by. How do you explain that? He didn't even hesitate to think about it. He answered me like that. He said, your gene is latent, hasn't come out yet. How do you argue with somebody that far out? I was speechless, just dumbfounded, driving along like, what? Well, my gene almost came out at that point. But and he's sitting over here all smug and secure, looking at me like, you got nothing to say. And sort of like when I crossed that line onto the Antifa side, they had nothing to say.
Right.
So I realized, I could provide all kinds of rationale and books written by PhDs and so forth and so on that would disprove him, but he would not buy into it. I had to
Right.
go to where he was. I had to understand where he was coming from. So I went to where he was, and I used his same figure of authority. I said, well, they say that all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer. And he says, what we talking about? And I said, name me 3 black serial killers. He couldn't do it. He couldn't even name me one. I named one for him. I said, here, I'm giving you one. Just name me 2. He couldn't do it. I said, Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, Son of Sam, Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, on and on. I said, son, they're all white. You are a serial killer. He said, Daryl, I've never killed anybody. I said, your gene is latent, hasn't come out yet. He goes, he goes, well, that's stupid. I said, well, duh. I said, you're right. It is stupid. But it's no more stupid for me to say that about you than what you said about me. He got very, very quiet. But I could tell his wheels were spinning around thinking about it. And then he didn't concede that day. He changed the subject in the next moment. But within 4 to 5 months, this guy left the Klan, and his robe was the first robe I ever got, based
Wow.
on that ridiculous conversation. So sometimes, you have to understand where somebody is coming from and meet them there if they can't meet you where you are. And I'm not saying one is above the other or one's below the other, anything like that. They're in a different space. So sometimes you have to go to their space and speak the language of that space.
There is a lot of smugness in I see it in politics, but I see it in everyday life as well. People content that they know exactly what's right, and that if you disagree with them, you're exactly wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
that's I find to be the biggest roadblock in getting people to reason with one another, or at least talk to one another. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, there is that mentality, especially by somebody who wears a red cap that says he's right about everything.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a special case there. And by the way, he's selling Christmas ornaments 2 for 1 right now. He's
Oh
sending
boy,
out
did you get
emails.
yours? Did you get
Yeah.
yours?
No, I
You
have
know,
to give him $10, and I'm not doing it. But I still get
but
those emails.
and we've also heard the phrase, the enemy of your enemy is not always your best friend.
No.
And these are things that we need to be wary of. I said, listen, if she has, there's redemption for everyone, but you must first make the apology and then take accountability and then make the repairs to the damage.
That's
And when
the
you,
hardest thing in the world for many people to do, to apologize, to admit that they're wrong.
yes,
It was
yeah,
it was the I can't remember who said it. It's far easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you get there?
Well, you bring that up and point that out. Say, hey, okay, fine. You're saying this now, but action speaks louder than words. What are you gonna? I'm hearing you now. Take the, you've apologized. I don't know if she apologized or not. She said she's breaking ranks or whatever.
Right.
But okay,
She
so
did.
now,
Marjorie Taylor Greene did apologize on the
okay,
air and
all
say,
right,
"Listen, I'm sorry for my for what I've done, and I'll try not to be as
okay, great.
toxic."
That's step one. Step two, take accountability. I am responsible for the damage I've done. Step three is Let me, what can I do to repair that damage? And then take those steps. Okay. It's a process. All right. Look, for example, if you're sitting in a theater, right? And somebody down the road, you're watching a movie or a play, whatever you're doing. Somebody down the road has to use the restroom or wants to go get popcorn, and they have to do that little dance between you and the seat in front of you, right?
Yeah.
And as they go by, they step on your foot, and they keep on going. They know they stepped on your foot, and it hurt, but they don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay?" Nothing. None of that. Just keep on going as though nothing happened. You are upset. You're upset, and you're in pain. And now you can't focus on the play or the movie, whatever it is you're watching, because you're wondering, why in the heck did that person step on my foot and not even acknowledge it? You are so enraged about that. All right. Now, and so it's ruined your evening of watching this play and this movie because you're consumed with that in your mind. Same scenario. This time the person walks by, steps on your foot. Oh, hey, are you okay, man? Can I get you anything? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The person is apologizing, taking accountability for it. Even though you're in pain, at least your suffering has been acknowledged. The person is holding himself accountable, and now you can continue watching whatever it is you're watching. All right,
Right.
that's what we need to see. All right, the apology, the accountability, and the repair, reparation.
And so on both sides, though, this is not a left
Yes.
or a right
No,
thing.
it's not. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's to me that well, I've been wronged. Well, you've wronged people, and the fact that you've
Haven't
been
we all
wrong.
been wrong at some point in our life?
Hey, on a daily basis, you got to get over
Right. Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So, but I want to go back to, at the beginning I was talking about how can you hate me? You don't even know me. And
Right.
the conversation how that happened, I think is important for people to understand because that's a huge step for people to make. It's a huge, to be able to talk to someone that hates you and your instinctive reaction is to hate back or to strike back, but
Right.
you didn't in that moment, and that I find I think is useful in politics. It's useful in culture. I certainly have used it with my own kids. So can you explain to me that particular moment in your life?
Yes, and then I'll explain the remedy for it. Okay, so I grew up as a child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. My parents were U.S. diplomats. I was an American embassy kid, traveling all around the world, beginning at the age of 3. And you get assigned to a country for 2 years, and then you come back home, and you're here for maybe a few months, possibly a year if you request it, and then you're back abroad again for 2 years, back and forth, back and forth. My first introduction to school was abroad. I began traveling at the age of 3 in 1961. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different schools in different countries. I did the in between ones, back home here.
Right.
And my classmates overseas, my first introduction to school overseas, my classmates were from all over the world. This little girl sitting to my right of this little desk might have been from Czechoslovakia. This kid over here from Nigeria, the kid behind me from Japan, kid in front of me from Italy, Norway, Finland, wherever. Anybody who had an embassy where we were stationed, all of their kids went to the same school. So
Right.
that became my baseline, Brian, for what school was supposed to be. And
Beautiful.
if yeah, exactly. And if you poked your head in my classroom door, you would say, "Wow, this looks like the United Nations of little children," because that's exactly what it was. But every time I'd come back home here to my own country, I would be in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And even though desegregation was passed by our U.S. Supreme Court 4 years before I was born in 1954, because I was born in 58, schools did not integrate in this country overnight. It took years and
No,
years, right?
I
And
was.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, even today in 2025, some parts of our country are still struggling with integration. But anyway, one of these times I came back was 1968. So I'm age 10. I'm in the fourth grade going to a newly integrated school, 1968, 16 years after the decision. And I was one of two black kids in the entire school. Me in fourth grade as a little black girl in second grade. So consequently, all of my friends were fourth and fifth graders, and they all were white. Several of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join, which I did. And we had a parade along with several other groups, the Girl Scouts, Brownies, Boy Scouts, 4-H Club, etc. And the streets were blocked off. Sidewalks on either side were lined with nothing but white people. I'm the only black person participating in this parade. And people were waving and cheering and smiling. This is in Massachusetts. Until we got to a certain point in this parade route when suddenly, pow, I'm getting hit by things that are being thrown from somebody on the right sidewalk. And soda pop bottles, soda pop cans, small rocks, just debris from the street. I look over to see who's throwing and why, and I saw a couple kids, perhaps a year or two older than me. I did not know them, not from my school, and a couple of adults yelling and screaming. I couldn't understand what they were saying. There's a marching band playing or whatever, but they're yelling and throwing things at me. And my first thought was, because I had no precedent for this behavior, oh, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. Given my background, I'd not grown up with that kind of thing. It wasn't until my Scout leaders came running, they were all white, and huddled over me with their own bodies and quickly escorted me out of this danger, that I realized none of my fellow Scouts are getting this special protection. So now I'm thinking, what had I done? I had done something to cause them to go off like that, because they were targeting me, not everybody. First I thought maybe they didn't like the Scouts, something like that.
Yeah.
And I kept asking my leaders, and they wouldn't answer the question. They kept shushing me and rushing me along, telling me, keep moving, everything will be okay. Fortunately, everything was okay. The people didn't follow us. But by the time the parade ended, I still didn't have an answer. So I go home, and my mom and dad, who were not at the parade, they had something else going on. I don't remember what. But anyway, they were home when I got there. They're looking at me and asking me, how did you trip and fall down and get all scraped up as you're cleaning me up and putting Band-Aids on me? And I told them what happened. And for the first time in my life, my mom and dad sat me down and explained to me what racism was. At the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about. This may, and furthermore, my 10-year-old brain could not process what they were telling me to be true. That somebody who had never seen me, never spoken to me, knew nothing about me, would want to inflict pain upon me for no other reason than the color of my skin. This makes no sense. My parents were absolutely dead wrong. And to prove that they were wrong and I was right, I pointed out the fact that the people over here on the sidewalk did not look any different than my fellow Scouts, my friends at school, or my friends overseas, whether they were my little Americans from the embassy or my little German or Danish or Swedish or Australian friends. So color had nothing to do with why people were throwing things at me. You all need a better explanation than that. So that same year, 1968, April 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember it very well.
I do too.
Nearby Boston burned to the ground. My hometown, Chicago, that.
Yeah.
So now I realize, all this stuff was being done in the name of this new word I had learned called racism. So now I accepted that my parents had told me the truth, but I didn't understand why people hated one another without knowing them. And that's when I formed that question at the age of 10. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? So to answer your question, how did I get on this path? Well, that question's been plaguing me now for 57 years, because I'm 67 now and I was 10 then. Who better to ask that question of? Brian, I have a vast library of books in my house that I've bought since a teenager and still buy them, on black supremacy, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, racism, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here. All my books talk about it, but they don't tell me why, at least not to my satisfaction. When I would
Yeah.
ask people, how can somebody hate somebody else when they don't even know them? The answer I would always get, oh, Daryl, some people are just like that. That's just the way they are.
Yeah.
That does not placate me, right? So I need an
And
answer.
answer the question.
Yeah, exactly. So who better to ask that question of than somebody who would go so far as to join an organization with over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them or who don't believe as they believe. So that's how I ended up seeking out people in the Ku Klux Klan. And I have a new book out that just came out here
Plug away.
called The Klan Whisperer. And I'm a firm believer that a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. So that's what
We
I do. I talk to people at these things.
we don't. Now look, this I know for people listening or watching, this will probably piss them off, the right and the left, and I really don't care. But in my experience, in my 40 some odd years experience as a reporter, I find that people on both sides of the fence don't talk to each other.
Mhm.
They preach, and so my friends on the left are going, to hell with the moderates in the Democratic Party, push them out. We need to be, and to hell with the conservatives. We're the big tent party, but we're not a big tent. The people on the right say, look, this is the reason why we are the way they are. They hate us. We hate them. And all I see everywhere is just this continuing lack of dialogue and headbutting and name calling. And at the end of the day, it's to me, it amounts to ignorance and fear, which you spoke to earlier.
Yes. Okay. So how that works is this: ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things of which we are ignorant, those things we don't understand. If that fear is not kept in check, that fear in turn will escalate into hatred because we hate the things that frighten us. If the hatred is not checked, that in turn will escalate into destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless at the end of the day, and we were simply ignorant. So, fortunately, there is a cure for ignorance. All right. The cure is education and exposure.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's where we need to commit our time, our energy, our resources, our finances, or whatever to getting that cure, giving people that education and that exposure. We spend way too much time in our country addressing the destruction. Forget about the destruction. What's been destroyed is not coming back. All right. The trade towers are not coming back. All right.
The East Wing
Um,
of the White House.
yeah, the East Wing of the White House is not coming back. All right. So forget about the destruction. That's a symptom of the nucleus, a root of the root cause. Forget about the hatred. Another symptom, a byproduct. Forget about the fear, another byproduct. The root cause of all this is ignorance. If we cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to get mad about and hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. All right. So, and this works equally for adults as it does for children, because I give lectures all over the country and around the world. All right. Whether they're little kids or adults. And I can tell you this: ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. When I talk to a class of little kids, right, they're all sitting at their little desks, from front to back, 5, 6 rows back. And I'll just be talking casually. And then all of a sudden, I'll jump and say, hey, hey, there's a snake under your chair, pointing to some kid in the front row. And instantly, that kid I point to screams and throws his or her legs up in the air at the suggestion there's a snake under their desk. Not only does he or she do it in the front row, everybody 5 rows back does it. Because they think
Right.
the snake might come to them too, right? And they're all screaming. And then they realize, I'm just putting them on, and they laugh. And I say, why are you all screaming and hollering? And the answers I get are, I hate snakes. Well, there's your hatred. I'm afraid of snakes. There's your fear. Okay, well, why do you hate snakes? Why are you afraid of snakes? Well, because they're slimy, they're poisonous. Well, there's your ignorance. If you've ever touched a snake before, it's not slimy, it's dry. All right. And not all snakes are poisonous. So there's
No.
your ignorance. All right. So I say, okay, fine. I was just kidding, obviously. But let's just say there really was a snake under your chair. What would you want me to do with it? The response: kill it. There's your destruction. And this is coming out of the mouths of little kids. Okay.
Right.
So that's universal, whether you're old or young or whatever.
Well,
So yeah.
no, let me take that a bit further. I remember growing up, the racists used separate but equal, and you could have an equal culture, and we don't have to mix. And I always thought that was silly as shit. But who was I? I was a young Lebanese kid. It was called San Negro, and every other epithet you could. I was white when it was convenient for them. I wasn't when it was convenient for them. I thought it was all bullshit. But then as we come along, I see there are people on the right and the left. There are black people who are now preaching almost separate but equal. I find that it abhorrent. And here's what I remember. I remember people giving us grief about And you were in Massachusetts, so I don't know if you were in Boston during the riots during
Yeah, yeah.
when school
I remember the whole thing.
desegregation.
I remember when Mayor Kevin White called in James Brown
Yeah,
to the Boston Garden. Yeah, I was
yes.
there.
I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and Boston, Massachusetts had the two largest. They hung the um, not the mayor, but they hung the chief of police in effigy at Southern High School in Louisville um, during the riots. And this is in 74, 75. So you would have been about a junior, I guess, in high school around that time. This is
You mean the riots after King, or
no
which one?
after the desegregation busing
Okay,
in the
gotcha.
70s.
All right,
And so those two cities went through the worst busing
right.
riots. And
Like
I
the
remember
combat
that
zone.
it was. And I remember being on the football field and we were playing football. About 4 or 5 kids from Central High School. That was the predominantly black school. We were Seneca High School, predominantly white, and they had bussed students back and forth. And so while people are screaming and ranting and raving, we were on the football field playing and getting actually to know each other. And so there were kids that played on our team that had played on Central, and they're going, "Oh, let me introduce you to Gucci. He's this guy." And I remember one of our tight end goes, "Hey, those are really cool tube socks. Where did you get them?" And suddenly here we were supposedly playing a football game where we're supposed to the two teams against each other. And in between plays, we were getting to know each other. I'm introducing him to Bobby over here, who played for us last season, and I'm introducing him to his players. And I found, I don't know why it stopped, but I thought that the desegregation, while violent when it started, was probably one of the wisest things ever done by getting kids to actually sit down and be with one another. And the riots in Kentucky and Louisville stopped. I remember exactly when they stopped. There was a picture on the front page of the paper when it was a little white kid walked over to a little black kid in school and put his arm around him. And the photographer from the Courier Journal Louisville Times, I think he won a Pulitzer for it, happened to be walking through the school and shot that photo. And so here was two 6 or 7 year old kids that were I mean, they didn't know black from white. They just knew that this
Exactly.
kid was
They
hurting.
knew love. They
Yeah,
knew
they knew
love.
love. And
To my
God,
point, everybody wants to be loved. They want to be
yeah,
respected. They want to be heard. They're treated fairly and truthfully. And the same things for their family as you want for yours.
yeah. I go back to that and go, I don't know that we've made any progress in what, since 75, so 50 years.
Well, you mentioned segregation. They can have their neighborhoods. We can have our neighborhoods.
Yeah,
Separate but equal. Okay. Let me tell you how that worked. Okay, how that started. The original term was white supremacist. All right. And people were proud to be a white supremacist. We are supreme, and we wear it proudly, right? And as the group, the KKK, which was formed in 1865 and then rebirthed in 1915 after Birth of a Nation came out and all that, the
yes.
movie, okay? So white supremacist was a badge of honor for these people. And the movement, the Klan, whatever, grew and grew. Along with the growth came the widespread violence, the lynchings, the bombings, the murders. Okay, it became so bad that the U.S. Congress got involved and passed what was called the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, and that drove the Klan underground.
Underground.
Okay, and then of course when the movie came out in 1915 by D.W. Griffith, there was a reinterest, rekindled,
A
and
well-known racist.
yes, and the Klan was reborn. All right, and then it rose to 4 million members nationwide, 1 million alone in Indiana. All right, and of course with the growth, here comes the violence again, and some people began dropping out because they didn't like black people, they didn't like Jewish people, but they didn't want to go to jail for killing them, or they felt it was morally wrong or something like that. They began dropping out. Membership began to dwindle, so they had to rebrand themselves because the term white supremacist or white supremacy was not palatable any longer. It carried a baggage, so they rebranded as white separatists. Oh, we don't hate black people or Jewish people. We just love our own. They can have their own schools, their own swimming pool, their own, neighborhood, workplace, etc., and we should have ours, right? Oh yeah, I like that idea. Okay, sign me up. I'm a white separatist. That became the badge of honor because white supremacist was a little unwelcoming and so forth and so on, and they didn't want to get involved with killing people. So they rebranded as white separatists. All right. And then the membership began to bloom again and grow, but so did the violence. So now they had to rebrand again, because now white separatism and white supremacy were both bad terms. Well, do you like your country? Yeah. Therefore, you're a nationalist. You like your nation. You're a nationalist, and guess what? You're white, so you're a white nationalist. Oh, okay. So now it's called white nationalism. Listen, let me tell you something, man. White supremacy, white separatism, and white nationalism. You know the old cliche: "A rose by any other name."
Yeah, right.
It's still a rose.
Or a pile of crap by any other name, but that's
Right. It's still, yeah. Or as my friend, former leader of the NSM, who I helped get out of it, Jeff Scoop, would say, you can't put lipstick on a pig and call it pretty.
right.
That's what people are doing. They're just rebranding the same old crap.
Well, that and the latest one is Christian nationalist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's another hate term that to me it's just a rebranding of the old
I mean, there's
hatred.
nothing wrong with liking your nation and calling yourself a nationalist. But then when you start putting those adjectives, black nationalist, white nationalist, Christian nationalist, that's where the trouble starts.
Yeah, anytime you divide yourself into a subset of humanity and you go to a tribe, I think you've got a problem. We're all, as you said
Now,
at the beginning, we're all human.
I'm glad you mentioned that word tribe,
Yeah,
because there's a lot of talk about tribalism, and people run to their own.
yeah,
I'm not better than anybody else, but let me tell you something. I have never tribalized, and that's because at a young age I was around people from all over the world. This was my tribe. That was
yeah.
my tribe.
That's your tribe, humanity. That's
Exactly.
I whenever you bring it up, I always go to the Groucho Marx statement. I'd never want to become part of a group that would have me as a member.
Right.
I'm not joining that club. The only club I join is humanity, and I agree with you. So as
Well, I co-founded an organization, a foundation called the Pro-Human Foundation, which is exactly what we do. We promote what we're pro. We're pro-humanity.
I'm in,
You can check out prohumanfoundation.org, and we've
there
written
you
a
go.
new K through 12 curriculum.
Anything else? Yeah, I mean, you got a book and anything else you want to plug before? And look, man, Daryl, I could do this for an hour and a half easily with you. It's always fascinating. It's always enjoyable, and I'd love to have you come back. But
Anytime.
we're coming to the end of our time. So, what do you got to plug?
Well, I have my book called The Clan Whisperer, and it has, for those people who have tried to get my original book, Clandestine Relationships, which is now out of print. A lot of publishers, I mean, not publishers, booksellers have leftover copies, but they jack up the price because it's rare. But guess what? The first book, Clandestine Relationships, 98% of it is already in this book,
There you go.
plus updates and news stories. The first one came out in 1997. This is the end of 2024. Beginning of 2025 is when this one came out.
And the organization again is
It's the Pro Human Foundation, prohumanfoundation.org.
there. You go. And this is, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Our guest has been Daryl Davis. This is Just Ask the Question, and we will catch you next time. And